They shook my hand, smiled, and told me I was the best thing to ever happen to this company. Then, without blinking, they slid a termination letter across the table. 8 years of loyalty, gone in a single meeting. I walked out with my head high, but inside, I was burning. They thought I'd vanish quietly. They had no idea I was holding something they needed more than air. And in 7 days, I'd be sitting in the glass tower of their biggest rival, planning the move that would make them regret ever crossing me. The smell of sizzling bacon filled the kitchen as I flipped the last pancake onto the plate. Emma, my 8-year-old daughter, sat at the table, swinging her legs, still in her pajamas, her hair an adorable mess. "Big day today, Daddy," she asked, pouring syrup onto her pancake like she was painting a masterpiece. "Big day," I said, kissing the top of her head. "And tonight, we're going to the park. Swings, ice cream, maybe even that merry-go-round you love." Her eyes lit up. "Promise?" "Promise," I replied, making it sound like an oath I'd carve into stone. By 8 a.m., I was in the office, coffee in hand, suit pressed sharp. The air buzzed with anticipation. Today, we were delivering the final build of a project I had lived and breathed for the past 6 months. My team was waiting in the conference room, laptops open, eyes on me. We walked through the presentation without a single hitch. When it ended, my boss, Greg, stood, smiling. "Ethan, you're the backbone of this company. We couldn't have pulled this off without you." He extended his hand, and I shook it, feeling that rare warmth of recognition. But as we filed out, something caught my eye. Greg's assistant, Marissa, was leaning over Jeremy's desk, the kind of lean you use when you don't want others to notice. She slipped a thick envelope into his laptop bag, glanced around, and straightened like nothing happened. Jeremy noticed me watching and quickly zipped the bag shut. I walked past, forcing my expression into something neutral, but a question lodged itself in my mind. What the hell was that? That night, the house was quiet when I got home. Emma was already asleep, sprawled across her bed with a stuffed bear under her arm. I stood there for a moment, watching her chest rise and fall, feeling the tight coil in my stomach loosen. She had no idea about the politics, the games, the whispered deals that sometimes decided a man's fate. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "You're the reason I fight so hard. Tell me, have you ever felt like your success might be a one-way ticket to a place you didn't expect?" The next week, the tone shifted. During Monday's meeting, Jeremy presented an idea, my idea, from the previous week's brainstorming session. The same architecture, the same scaling solution I'd spent 2 late nights perfecting. Greg beamed at him. "Brilliant, Jeremy. This could really change the way we handle data migration." I leaned back in my chair, heart thudding. My mouth opened, then closed. I could have spoken up, claimed it as mine, but every eye in the room was fixed on Jeremy. Greg's gaze slid right over me, as if I were a chair or a potted plant. After the meeting, I lingered, waiting for a moment to speak with Greg. When our eyes met, his smile faltered, just for a second, before he looked away and started typing something on his phone. No acknowledgement. No explanation. Back at my desk, my phone buzzed. "Mom." "How's work, Ethan?" she asked, her voice carrying that mix of curiosity and expectation only mothers can muster. "It's fine," I lied. "When will they promote you? You've been there 8 years. Your college friends are all directors or VPs now." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Mom, it's not that simple." "You work harder than anyone I know," she said. Don't let them take advantage of you. If only she knew. That afternoon, an email pinged in my inbox. Organizational restructure, staff review pending. My name sat in the roles under evaluation column, like a bullet point waiting to hit flesh. I read it twice, my pulse picking up. There were no explanations, no details, just a bland corporate note about strategic alignment and resource optimization. I stared at the screen. My mind ran through every possible meaning. Was it performance-based? Political? Retaliation? You tell me, if you were in my position, would you confront them head-on or stay quiet and watch? The first cut didn't come from my enemies. It came from the person I'd trusted most. It was Wednesday afternoon, and the office was unusually quiet. I was on my way back from the break room when I passed by the glass-walled conference room. Through the half-drawn blinds, I caught sight of Jeremy sitting across from Greg. They were leaning in close, speaking in low tones. I wouldn't have thought much of it, except Jeremy's hand was on a manila folder, and Greg slid it toward him with a nod that said more than words could. Curiosity stopped me cold. I ducked into the nearest cubicle, pretending to check my phone, but angling myself just enough to see. Greg tapped a page, his lips moving, and Jeremy smirked. My friend, my closest ally in the trenches, had that smug expression I'd seen before when he'd pulled something off, except this time, whatever he'd pulled off had my name written all over it. When they left, I stepped into the conference room and glanced at the folder they'd left behind. Just a few pages visible, but the header was enough. Staff evaluation, performance risks. And right there, underlined, was my name. The words beneath it were obscured, but I didn't need to read them to know the narrative being spun. That evening, Greg called me into his office. He was all smiles, too much smile. Ethan, we need your signature on this report before it goes up to compliance. It's about the Northbridge project. We're making some adjustments to keep everything clean for the auditors. I took the document from him, scanning the lines. My stomach dropped. There were falsified numbers. Metrics I knew were wrong because I'd been the one tracking them. This wasn't about cleaning up. It was about covering up. This isn't accurate, I said. Greg's tone softened, almost paternal. It's for the good of the company. If these figures get out as they are, we could lose the contract. Everyone's job could be on the line. And if I refuse? His smile faded. Then, Ethan, I can't guarantee what your future here will look like. You've been here a long time. I'd hate to see it end badly. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the HVAC. I set the report down. I won't sign it. For a moment, something flashed in his eyes. Annoyance, maybe even anger, before he masked it with a shrug. Suit yourself. That night, I tucked Emma into bed. She wrapped her arms around my neck, holding on longer than usual. I stroked her hair, breathing in the scent of shampoo and crayons. For a few minutes, I let myself forget about Greg, Jeremy, and the knife I'd just watched slide between my ribs. I just held my daughter, wishing the world was as safe as she believed it to be. The next day, fate delivered the proof I didn't want but desperately needed. I was walking past the supply closet when I heard Greg's voice. I froze. Get rid of him before the client signs off, he said. Jeremy's voice followed, low and conspiratorial. Once he's out, they'll have no reason to question the changes. I stood there, heart pounding, the fluorescent light buzzing overhead. They were going to cut me out before the biggest contract of my career closed, before the payoff for the project I'd bled into could be claimed. I walked away before they came out, my mind racing. The shock was gone. In its place was a sharp, cold clarity. They wanted me gone? Fine. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I started small. Every questionable email Greg had sent, every suspicious file Jeremy had accessed, I made copies. I downloaded time-stamped backups of project logs, meeting recordings, and budget revisions. To anyone watching, I was the same old Ethan, showing up on time, making small talk at the coffee machine, hitting my deadlines. But behind the scenes, I was building my own case. Then came the discovery that changed everything. While combing through server logs, I noticed an anomaly, a vulnerability in the data encryption layer of our client interface. To the untrained eye, it looked like a harmless quirk. But to me, it was a glaring hole, one that could, if exploited, cause millions in damages and expose sensitive client data. I sat there, staring at the code, weighing the implications. With this, I could protect myself. With this, I could bring them down. Which would you choose? To save yourself? Or to get even? I didn't decide right away. Instead, I documented everything about the vulnerability, screenshots, code snippets, evidence of how long it had gone unnoticed. I stored it off-site, somewhere they couldn't touch. On Thursday evening, as I was shutting down my computer, an alert popped up, an incoming message from an unlisted number. "I know what they're doing to you," it read. "Meet me tomorrow at 7 p.m., Cafe Torino. Come alone." No name, no signature, just that. I stared at the message, a mix of suspicion and curiosity tightening my chest. Whoever it was, they knew enough to reach me directly. And if they knew about Greg and Jeremy's scheme, they might also know how to stop it. The office lights dimmed as the cleaning crew made their rounds. I slipped my phone into my pocket, shut down my screen, and walked out into the night. Above me, the city hummed with neon and exhaust, 1,000 other stories unfolding behind glass windows. Mine had just entered its most dangerous chapter. The email came late Tuesday night. Mandatory meeting, 9 a.m., executive conference room. No agenda, no explanation. By morning, the air in the office felt heavier than usual. People avoided eye contact as I walked past. In the conference room, Greg sat at the head of the table, flanked by HR. Jeremy was there too, sitting back with that faint smirk he never bothered to hide anymore. Greg started with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Before we begin, I want to acknowledge Ethan Carter's tremendous contributions to this company. You've been a pillar of reliability, dedication, and innovation." A flicker of unease moved through me. Compliments before bad news. Never a good sign. "That said," Greg continued, "in light of recent restructuring and strategic priorities, we've made the difficult decision to terminate your employment, effective immediately." The words were clean, rehearsed, delivered like lines from a script. I waited for a punchline that never came. I looked at him, then at Jeremy, who kept his gaze fixed on the table, his lips pressed into what I swear was the ghost of a grin. There were papers slid toward me, a severance agreement, and a thinly veiled reminder about the NDA I'd signed years ago. I read none of it. Instead, I pulled the pen from my jacket, signed where they told me to, and closed the folder. Then I stood, slipped my USB drive into my palm, and smiled, a slow, deliberate thing that made Greg's brow crease. "Thank you for everything," I said, my voice even. "I'm sure I'll put my experience to good use." I walked out, my hand tightening around the drive like it was a weapon. On the way home, I passed Emma's school. On impulse, I pulled over, walked up to the classroom window, and peered inside. She was standing in front of the class, holding her favorite stuffed bear, telling a story. "My dad's a superhero," she said, her voice clear and proud. "He always fixes problems nobody else can fix." The class laughed and clapped, and she beamed, completely unaware that her superhero had just been stripped of his badge. I stayed there until the lesson moved on, then turned away before anyone noticed me. "Tell me, do you think I was going to just walk away from this?" That night, I opened the message from the unknown number again. "Cafe Torino, 7 p.m. Come alone." I arrived early, choosing a corner table with my back to the wall. 10 minutes later, a man in his 40s approached, wearing a faded blazer and eyes that had seen too much. "You're Ethan," he said. "And you are?" "Someone who knows what it's like to be on their list." He slid into the seat across from me. "Name's David. I worked there before you. Same pattern. Build you up, take your work, cut you out before the payoff." He told me about the internal deals, the falsified reports, the way Greg and his clique kept themselves untouchable. Then came the twist. I've been consulting for another firm, one of their competitors. They're struggling with a security flaw. Same type of system your old company uses. I heard you've discovered something interesting. I didn't answer, but my eyes must have betrayed me. "They'd pay well for a solution," David continued, "and it would hurt Greg more than you can imagine." I thought about the vulnerability I'd found, the patch I'd built in secret. It wasn't just a fix. It was leverage. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you're the only one who can do it right. And you've got a reason to." The deal was simple. I'd bring them the solution. They'd bring me on as a consultant with the option for a permanent position. It was a win for them, and for me, well, it was the start of something bigger. By Friday, I had the framework ready. I transferred the encrypted patch to a secure drive, my ace in the hole. That evening, an email from my old company appeared in my inbox. "Ethan, we need to discuss your NDA and certain proprietary materials in your possession. Please contact us immediately." I leaned back in my chair, reading it twice. They knew, or at least they suspected, the real game had just begun. The deal with David's client moved faster than I expected. Within a week, my patch had been integrated into their system, closing a hole that had been bleeding data and credibility for months. The turnaround was immediate. Service outages dropped to 0. Client satisfaction scores shot up, and their stock ticked upward like a heartbeat finding its rhythm again. For me, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing the code I'd written. The late nights and coffee-fueled problem-solving were now breathing life into a company that valued my contribution. They didn't just thank me. They listened, they asked questions, and they paid very well. But the real satisfaction came from watching the news. Pinnacle Systems loses major government contract amid security concerns. The headline glared at me from my laptop screen one Tuesday morning. Pinnacle, my old company, had been dropped by their biggest client. The contract, worth tens of millions, had gone to none other than my new partners. I clicked the article. The language was careful, couched in sources close to the matter and insider reports. But the gist was clear. The client had lost faith in Pinnacle's ability to protect sensitive data. Someone had tipped them off about vulnerabilities, though the article didn't say who. I didn't need them to. Greg's photo accompanied the piece, a shot from some industry event, his smile tight, his eyes just a shade too tense. I imagined the meetings behind closed doors, the shouting, the finger pointing. The thought should have filled me with pure triumph, but instead it left a small knot of unease in my chest. Victory, it seemed, could carry its own kind of danger. That Saturday, I finally made good on a promise. The park was buzzing with families, kids running across the grass, the smell of hot dogs and popcorn in the air. Emma and I spent the afternoon moving from the swings to the slides to the carousel, her laughter bubbling up like it hadn't in weeks. "Faster, Daddy," she called as I pushed her higher. "You're going to touch the clouds at this rate." I laughed, pretending to shield my eyes from the sun as she soared. When she finally tired, we sat on a bench with ice cream cones, watching the ducks paddle in the pond. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about strategy or evidence or revenge. I was just there, with her. That's when I saw him. Across the park, near the line of trees, a man stood with a camera. Not a phone. A real camera. The kind with a zoom lens. He wasn't taking pictures of the scenery. The lens was pointed straight at us. I felt the hair on my neck stand up. "Emma," I said, keeping my voice light, "let's go check out the fountain." I kept my eyes on the man as we walked, but by the time I turned for a better look, he was gone. On Monday, the phone calls started. First, it was an old project manager from Pinnacle, then a systems analyst, then 2 engineers I'd mentored years ago. They were all saying the same thing. The company was unraveling. Teams were fighting. Projects stalled. Clients were walking. And in every call, there was the same quiet question, unspoken until the end. "Do you know a way out of this?" I didn't answer, not directly. Then came the 4th call, this one from someone I never expected. "Ethan?" The voice was familiar, deep and careful. "Greg, we need to talk." I almost hung up. "It's not about what happened," he said quickly. "It's about what's going to happen if this keeps spiraling. There are people above me who won't stop at letting the company fail. They'll come after anyone they think is responsible." I stayed silent. "Meet me," he said. "Tonight. Your call where?" I didn't agree. I didn't say no either. That evening, as I walked Emma from the car to the house, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. The man from the park, same jacket, same build, was leaning against a car across the street. He wasn't holding a camera this time, but I knew it was him. By the time I got Emma inside, my pulse was pounding. I stood by the window, watching as he checked his phone, then slid into the driver's seat and pulled away. The next day, I found out who he was. David called me mid-morning. "Your park photographer. He's ex-corporate security. Works private now. Guess who hired him?" "Greg," I said. "Bingo." Why would Greg have me followed? Was it about the patch? The NDA? Or was it something else entirely? Tell me, if the man who engineered your downfall came asking for help, would you even take his call? I didn't have long to ponder it. That evening, a knock sounded at my door. I opened it to find Greg himself, standing on my porch in a tailored suit, looking like the last 6 weeks hadn't happened. "We need to talk," he said. Greg stepped into my living room like he owned the place, though his eyes gave away something I'd never seen in them before. Wariness. I didn't offer him a seat. "Make it quick," I said. He took a slow breath. "I didn't want you gone, Ethan." "Not really. I was ordered to cut you out." I laughed without humor. "By who? Jeremy? You could have told me." "Not Jeremy," Greg said, shaking his head. "It's bigger than him. Bigger than me. The orders came from the parent group, the holding company that owns Pinnacle. They wanted someone they could control leading your project, someone who'd sign whatever they put in front of him. You weren't that guy. His tone was flat, but I caught the flicker in his eyes when he said it. Respect, maybe even regret. And you went along with it, I said. I didn't have a choice. I've seen what they do to people who refuse. He hesitated, then added, You think I got to this chair without making compromises? You think you could have? I didn't answer. Memories surfaced. Greg covering for me when a client blamed us for their own screw-up. Greg pushing my raise through when the budget committee balked. I'd written those moments off as political maneuvering, but maybe there had been more to them. They're not going to stop, Ethan, he said. You've already hurt them. That patch you gave our competitor, they know it was you. If you think you can just fade into the background, you're wrong. He reached into his briefcase and slid a thick envelope across my coffee table. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were printed emails, contract excerpts, and transaction records. Names, dates, amounts, all pointing to a covert slush fund within the parent company. It was the kind of thing that could topple more than just Pinnacle. You're the only one who can take them down, Greg said quietly. I looked up at him. Why me? Because you've got nothing left to lose. That night, I read every page. By the time I was done, I knew exactly how deep the rot went, and I knew I couldn't do it alone. 2 days later, I sat in the back of a quiet cafe with 4 familiar faces. David, the ex-Pinnacle security lead, a former compliance officer named Lena, and an engineer named Marco who'd been let go the same month as me. We formed a plan. Leak the evidence to regulators and the press, but do it in a way that traced the corruption all the way to the top. For a week, we worked in secret. I handled the digital trail, Marco the technical validation, Lena the legal framing, David the contacts who could get the story out without it being buried. It was tight, focused, and dangerous. Then the call came. It was Lena. Her voice was low and urgent. Someone tipped them off. They know about the group. I froze. Who? I don't know yet, but they're moving fast. We've got hours, maybe less. When I hung up, the weight of it sank in. Someone in our small circle had turned. Someone was feeding the very people we were trying to bring down. Tell me, if you knew someone at your table was betraying you, would you keep going or cut your losses? We didn't get the chance to debate it. That night, our safe meeting place, a rented office space above a hardware store, was swarmed. Not police, but private security, the kind that moved like they'd been trained to clear buildings in hostile territory. We barely made it out through the back stairwell. In the chaos, I caught sight of Marco talking to one of the men in tactical gear, his hands raised, his voice calm. He didn't run. He didn't even look at us. We scattered into the night, the sound of boots on concrete echoing behind us. Somewhere between the adrenaline and the betrayal, I realized the stakes had just changed. We weren't just fighting to bring down a corrupt company anymore. We were fighting to stay free. The night after the raid, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dim light of my home office, staring at the files Greg had given me, the ones we'd been preparing for weeks. The clock ticked toward dawn, and with each passing minute, the risk of sitting still grew. It was time. I encrypted everything: emails, financial records, voice recordings, and sent them to every contact we had in the press and regulatory agencies, major newspapers, investigative journalists, oversight boards. Some would bury it, but enough would run it to make the story impossible to contain. The last upload finished just as the sun cracked over the horizon. My chest felt hollow, like I'd given away the only thing keeping me alive. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "I got your package," a voice said. It was Lena. "I thought you were burned," I replied. I was. They were watching me, but I passed the files to a friend before they could grab me. "That's why you still have them." Relief hit me so hard I had to sit down. All this time, I'd believed Lena had been compromised. Turns out, she was the reason the evidence made it through. That afternoon, news outlets erupted. "Corporate giant under federal investigation." One headline read, "Whistleblower documents reveal multi-million-dollar slush fund." The parent company's stock plummeted. Government investigators moved in, seizing records, freezing accounts. For the first time in months, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease. The next morning, I walked Emma to school. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of leaves and distant wood smoke. She chattered about her class field trip while I just listened, smiling. When we reached the gate, she kissed my cheek and ran off to join her friends. I stood there a moment longer, watching her disappear into the crowd, feeling the weight of the last few months finally lift. Back home, I opened my email to find a new message at the top of my inbox. "Mr. Carter, we have followed your recent work with great interest. We'd like to discuss a strategic leadership role within our global security division." The sender was a major international tech firm, one with the resources to make this more than just a job offer. I didn't reply. Not yet. 2 weeks later, Pinnacle was unrecognizable. Half the board had been indicted. Greg had resigned to spend more time with family, and the company was under temporary federal oversight. The employees who'd been silenced before were suddenly speaking freely, their stories fueling a second wave of investigations. One story caught my eye. Jeremy, my old colleague, the one who'd taken credit for my work, had left the industry entirely. He was volunteering at a community tech center, teaching underprivileged kids how to code. When a reporter asked why, he said, "I have a lot to make up for." I didn't know if it was penance or PR, but it didn't matter. It wasn't my job to judge him anymore. Tell me, do you think forgiveness is the deepest form of revenge? One evening, as the rain tapped softly against the windows, Emma climbed into my lap with a worn storybook. We read by the warm light of the lamp, her head resting on my shoulder. When the last page turned, I closed the book and kissed her hair. "I kept my promise," I whispered. She looked up at me, puzzled. "What promise?" "That I'd always do what's right, no matter how hard it is." She smiled and nestled back into my arms. And in that moment, all the noise, the boardrooms, the betrayals, the headlines, faded away. What remained was this: a quiet victory, measured not in contracts won or enemies defeated, but in the life I'd fought to protect.